All right, Nicole, this is so fun to have you here. Thank you so much for being such an expert in this field. Let me introduce you really quickly. You are Nicole Andrews. You are an owner. You are the CEO of Fastapp, which makes you the perfect expert, perfect person to put in our CE. Thank you for being here. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me. You're
Yes,
so
of
sweet.
course.
I
Of course.
appreciate it. I'm very excited to do this with you.
We appreciate it. So I want to know, how has the appraisal industry changed over the last couple of years? What are some of the kind of key trends that you've seen that have led to the changes?
So mostly the things that I think that are big changes, like 2007, obviously you have the crash of the market. Frank Dodd comes in, then AMCs come in. And being a part of that, the AMC field, I think that there was more legislation that obviously separated the market from appraisers and lenders. And over the last couple of years after COVID, you saw big changes in how we inspect properties. And that then gave appraisers a little bit more perspective on things that they can do, alternative ways that they can do things. So I think that's really like the key things that have happened over the last couple of years, looking at us as a whole, as an industry whole, like what's happened really over the last 20 years brought us to where we are today. And then COVID kind of made some intermittent changes and now has made everybody brainstorm about how we move forward and how we look at the industry as a whole. We had, the upswing during COVID and after COVID that really caused appraisers to, let's be honest, be overworked, underpaid in their opinion. And I agree with them wholeheartedly. And so I think that the alternatives in the last like 4 years have been really about how we assist the appraisers. Fannie has been looking at it, and I know we're going to talk about some of those changes coming up. But Fannie has really looked at like how we help the appraisers to assist the appraisers in doing evaluations and getting them done quicker,
Mm.
so that to help when the next big boom comes. Now it's slow in the marketplace, but it'll come again, as we all know. And so Fannie's really been focusing on how we make those changes streamlined for the appraisers to really assist them in trying to get things done quicker, and more just efficient as well, so that valuations stay with high quality.
I have to imagine too that there will be AI improvements that are going to come down the pike that are probably going to move some of those inefficiencies out. AI is always a hot topic. Another hot topic that I've seen over the past year, of course, appraisal bias. What steps do you take to ensure accuracy and to ensure that your appraisals are as fair as possible?
Okay, so first I'm just going to touch on AI real quick. Yes, you're
Please,
absolutely
please.
right, LaDonna. At some point, AI is going to have some effect on appraisals. In what capacity? I don't think that it's traditional what people are thinking. Let's be honest. Like, AI is just a repeat. And I mean, I shouldn't go into this because I'm not a computer person, but from what I understand and what I've been educated on, AI is just repeating things, right? Like Chat GPT, it goes in, it goes to a billion different resources and it looks at and then it makes a great email for somebody because it has all of these resources. So as far as appraisal is concerned, it's going to be more difficult for AI to really opine on an appraisal of your subject property, right? Because your
Mhm.
house is special to you and there's probably not a ton of information out there on your particular property. There's probably not interior pictures. 50% of the world there is because a real estate agent has listed it in the last 10 years. So there is some information out there, but particular to you, you may have updated your property, you may have added a square feet to the subject property. So AI is going to be a real tricky thing that we could talk about for hours on here. But I do think that it's going to influence, and I actually think it's going to be positive for appraisers. And then with what you just asked is I think that it could be positive with that as well. Because when you
Mm.
talk about appraisal bias, you talk about a couple of things that I'd like to say is I think that a lot of times it's unfair to appraisers. Appraisers have to stay educated. They have their licensing in their state, but they're required by each state to stay educated. And I think that people don't give them enough credit for who they are and how much respect we really should have for appraisers. And I think that they're underappreciated in our industry in a whole, unfortunately. And when appraiser bias came on, I think it's always been there, let's be honest.
Right, that kind of came to our radar, the forefront a little bit more.
Thank you for articulating that better. So many people got involved. Fair housing and appraisers are now required by the state to be educated, to take educational courses. And there are all types of things now in the appraisal, being that it's standardized, that they have to follow to ensure they don't have bias. People ask me all the time, do you think appraisers are biased? I think everybody is biased to something, to their hair color, to their eye color, to different things in the world. I think that we're all biased to certain things. It's what, appeals to us, innately inside of us, right?
So bias exists.
Absolutely. And I don't think that we're going to get rid of that completely. I think that people genuinely try to avoid they're biased in their feelings, and appraisers are the same way. They're educated to try to look at something as a piece of property and put standards on it and look at it the way they're supposed to. And us as an AMC, what we do is when we review the appraisal, we definitely look for trigger words, what we call trigger words. So as a reviewer is reviewing the appraisal, they're looking for those trigger words. And if we see those words, then that can help us to understand if there's bias in the appraisal itself. And then we further review commentary and different things like that, maybe the location of the comparables to understand, is it right there in the marketplace, so that we can say, no, there isn't bias. Because if it's a suburban area, those comparables should be within probably a half a mile of the subject property. And if all of a sudden we see an appraiser go outside that, and then why is he going outside that neighborhood? Is there a reason why? And maybe he's trying to steer something in a direction where it shouldn't be. And so those are the ways that those trigger words really help us to understand that. But back to appraisers, I think they stay educated. I think they try. Is there bias? Absolutely. There's always going to be. I think just like everything else in the world, I think it's more localized than we would like to believe, because it became such a trigger for a while. But I think most appraisers, they want to do a good job. They have their licensing. It's their livelihood. They want to do a good job for us. So I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. And you're so right. At one point in my career, very, very, very early on, I would go out and conduct property inspections. I worked for a title company, and sometimes there was some carryover for notice of defaults, et cetera. And at one point I was like, maybe I should look into being an appraiser. I loved that element of it. And then going out and seeing what it took to be an appraiser, I was like, scratch that. Never mind. I am not here for that. But you're right. There is a certain level of respect that we need to hold an appraiser in. And I think you're right. As long as there is a human element in just about everything, bias will always exist.
You're going to have a small portion of that. And I mean, we know it exists in the world, and we just try to minimize that as much as we can. As a company, we do it. And I think appraisers themselves, I think they audit themselves, and I think they're trying to do a better job at it as well. And I think that bringing it into the forefront of the media has caused people to self-reflect, or people who want to self-reflect, right? So yes. I think that appraisers are the same. They're human beings just like you and I. And I think they have taken it seriously. I mean, states require the education now. There are all kinds of other ways that appraisers are auditing themselves too. So I think it's been a good thing that it came up, and that it became a hot button for a while, because it only makes us better as people and as appraisers.
Completely agree. Another update that's coming out is the Uniform Appraisal Dataset, Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on it? Do you view it as a positive development? What do you kind of think people should be aware of as these changes are coming into the picture?
I do. I think Fannie and Freddie have done a really good job. I don't know if you've personally seen the new reporting. I think it's going to. Appraisers will say you have to understand that appraisers as a whole we're old, and so any change, and especially change when it comes to our systems, watch out. We all kind of freak out a little bit. And I think that that's to be expected. Appraisers are going to be upset, but the more we educate them and explain to them what's happening in the marketplace, and even let's be honest, lenders are going to feel the same way. We're all used to looking at a URAR, right? That's our form. We have the 1004, 1025, 1073. And let's be honest, most lenders, they scroll down the report, they look at the value, and they move on with life. And appraisers have an hour worth of putting that information in the report. Well, what Fannie and Freddie are trying to do is both standardize, talk about bias and all of the other things. They're trying to standardize the report, and it's going to be one report. I don't know if your audience knows that, but it's going to be only one report. And so that one report, basically, when you put in the address and you put in the type of the subject property, then it will auto-populate into the type of form based on that. So you put in the information and it more auto-populates. It's a little hard to explain.
No,
but
that sounds amazing, though, like a solid improvement.
100%. So I think it is a solid improvement. And I think that it's more fluid. And I think once appraisers get used to it, I think they'll like it more. It reminds me of one of the, oh my goodness, what are they called? ClickForms and Alamode and ACI are the three companies that have the forms. And so they're the forms publication companies. For lack of a better word, because I can't think of the name of it right now, and I apologize. But ACI, it reminds me more of like an ACI form set, data set, the way that they had it. So I think people who are working on ACI won't have as much of a difficult transitioning. But I think ACI and Alamode clients, appraisers, that use those two form types will have a little bit more difficult time. But I think once they get used to it, I actually think it's going to be a lot easier and quicker. And I think that it's going to be standard across the board. There's more information. Like one of the good features of it, just to give you an idea, is like, say the appraiser says something about the basement has water intrusion. On that page where the addendum would be, where it used to be that, you were like on page 2 of the subject property, and you might put something there. In an addendum, you might put that there was, water in the basement, and then the pictures were down another 10 pages. Now the photo will be right next to that. So it'll pop in a photo that will show you right there where you're reading about the water and what it looks like, or the mold, or, no handrails on the steps. The photo will be right there to give you that idea of what the appraiser's talking about as you read it, which really helps us as human beings to, formulate, what we're thinking about it. And so I think that visual really will be helpful. And so they've done small things like that throughout the report that will really help us as humans to, absorb the information quicker. And that will just happen naturally while the appraiser's typing, and then he'll download all of his photos and he'll put basement water, and it'll populate right up into the report.
Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. So Fannie and Freddie, excuse me, because it's both of them combined. They've been working together with, I'm sure, tons of other people, but they've been working diligently to make this happen. And it won't happen completely until November of 2026, just to give your viewers an idea. So we won't even start really seeing it being utilized until the end of 2025. I think the date, don't quote me on this, but I think it's November of 2025 is the date we'll starting to use the form. And then it'll be November of 2026 before it's mandatory to be
Got
utilized
it.
by all appraisers. And then I think there's
Got
even a
it.
2-month period where it's a soft rollout where like if they utilize the other report, it would be okay. And let's be honest, whenever we've done some major changes like this in the industry, the data's always been extended. So
It always has
November
to
20,
be.
always. We always think we're going to be able to do things quicker than we are. And when we get rolling into something, it always changes. So I imagine that it'll probably be 2027 before we really see a hard, you're using it and that's all there is to it. Because it'll be a biggest transition in the lender side of things, brokers, everybody, because they're used to looking at the report the way that it is right now. Going to page 3 will no longer be page 3, 2, 1, whatever. It's completely different. So it's going to be a difficult transition for people.
It will, but it sounds like it's a much needed
Positive.
update. So I think
Absolutely.
that's always a great thing. Nicole,
Standardizing things can help only in our industry, I think, as a whole, as we talked about prior.
completely agree. You are amazing. Thank you
Thank you.
for knowing your craft so well and being able to jump in here and take care of this. You are so phenomenal.